Hey guys, Josh here. I wanted to spend a little bit of time and talk about the difference between an abolitionist view and an abolitionist bill that we can try and get into our government to abolish abortion, and what you typically see with pro-life style bills. This is all part of my journey as I started looking into this more last year about the difference between voting for a candidate who said they're pro-life and voting and actually trying to be involved and do something. And typically you see pro-life bills that to some extent they probably mean well, and you'll see things like a heartbeat bill is one that you'll typically find is no abortions if you can detect a heartbeat. And I recently watched something where where someone doing the ultrasound can actually manipulate the camera in such a way where you can't detect a heartbeat. And they used the sonogram, they did it, but they couldn't detect a heartbeat, so they went, you can easily work around it, as well as you have to show the mother a sonogram of the baby before. And again, the same thing, you can manipulate the camera where technically the baby is in frame, but it just doesn't show the life. You can't see the fingers, you can't see the nose, which is clearly visible with any sonogram. And so you see these types of things being worked in, and instead of doing what we should be doing by abolishing this murder of children, we try and do things to make it slightly less accessible, which really just means be more creative. And then unfortunately you have in some states actively working against people who are trying to do abolitionist bills, pro-life groups that fight against abolitionist bills. In one state in particular, in Arizona, where there was already on the books a law to not commit abortions, this pro-life group actively worked against that current law to change it, where they had to detect a heartbeat, provide a proper burial for the baby once you've murdered it, and different things like that. So my stance is we should be looking to abolish abortion across the United States. Does that make it more difficult? Does that make it more difficult for people to accept? Absolutely. But we're talking about murder. You wouldn't tell people that when people try and murder their family, they typically do it around like the children, and so we should have a safe place where a father can very easily murder the mother. Otherwise the kids could see it and be traumatized. And we would scoff at them and laugh at them. We're talking about accepting murder. We shouldn't make it more accessible. We shouldn't make it easier to deal with. We're talking about murdering children. And so for that, we should abolish it. We shouldn't make it somewhat less stigmatized. Shouldn't make it any less of a stigma. We shouldn't make it any less of a dirty word, because we're talking about murder. So that's why we should be, as Christians, as people who believe in the image of God being placed on humans, because dogs aren't made in the image of God. Pigs, cats, they're not made in the image of God. People are made in the image of God, and that should be protected. So hopefully you will look into that further and move with us as we look to abolish abortion across the United States.